I am thrilled to be bringing this everyday crop pattern to you. It has been very, very, very highly requested. It has a nice boat neckline. It also has armpit coverage, which we love. I've made tons and tons and tons of these, so I have a lot of experience with the little nitty-gritty things that make this pattern really fit well and also really feel good on the body. One thing that's going to be really important for this pattern is choosing the right kind of fabric. If you don't choose the right kind of fabric, it can cause some fit issues, and I'm going to show you what that actually looks like. So in terms of what is the right kind of fabric, you want something that's on the thicker side, not something that has drape to it or that is lightweight. You also want something that has stretch up to like 50%. And you want to make sure that when you stretch the fabric, when you let it go, it goes back to its original shape. Choosing fabric that has good recovery is going to be absolutely essential so that this nice neckline is going to hold its shape. This pattern is fully lined, and inside of the two layers, there's elastic at the neckline and the armholes. We're going to do a tiny bit of stretching around this front armhole area so it hugs our body really nicely, but if you overstretch it or you stretch it on other parts of the garment, it's going to cause some fit issues. Here's an example of one I made where I actually stretched it across the entire neckline and all the way around the armholes. I did this just to try out the construction method to see how it would work, but you can actually especially tell, because this has stripes, that there's kind of like this bubbling situation happening, and it's better when it's on the body because it gets stretched out by your body, but it's still visible, especially at this neckline area. So you want to make sure that we're not overstretching in any of the areas. I had also mentioned not to use a lightweight and drapey fabric, and that is because this is what happens. You see how it's draping in the middle here? It's doing like a cowl situation, but we don't want that. We want this boat neckline to really hold its structure, and that's only possible if you choose fabric that's on the heavier side. If you look at the difference between the way this one hangs on the hanger and the way this one hangs on the hanger, you can see that the neckline on this one droops and the neckline on this one stays structured. So all that to say that choosing the correct fabric is really important, and then also following the directions in terms of the elastic is going to be really important. Now, without further ado, let's get into sewing this garment. We're going to start by cutting out our fabric. You'll need 2 layers of each pattern piece, one for the outside of the garment and one for the inside of the garment. If you'd like to make this fully reversible, you absolutely can, in which case you might consider using a different color for the outside and for the inside. LOL at me hitting my overhead tripod. Okay, so we've cut out 2 front pieces and 2 back pieces. Now what we want to do is place one front and one back with right sides together, and then another front and another back with right sides together. It's a little bit hard to tell the right side from the wrong side, which I think is actually fine, because if it's hard to tell right now, you're definitely not going to be able to tell when it's on the body. So let's go ahead and just match up the shoulders of one front and back, and then the same for the other front and back. Okay, and we're just going to pin those shoulders together. I like to use pins over clips just because it's easier for the purpose of using a knit, but pins work just as well as clips. Now we're going to want to sew just these shoulder seams with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That can be done either with a serger or a zigzag stitch. I'm going to be using a serger for this project because I have one, but a zigzag stitch is going to work just as well. Okay, so our shoulders are sewn together, and I also want to point out at this stage that when you hang the garment from the shoulders, this front neckline sits lower than the back neckline. That's just a good thing to remember as you go through this project so that you can distinguish the front from the back really easily. Now what we want to do is press these seam allowances. I'm going to press one set of seam allowances towards the back of the garment and then the other set of seam allowances towards the front of the garment. That way, when we put them right on top of each other, they're going to be facing in opposite directions, which is going to cause less bulk when we sew the neckline and the armholes together. Okay, now that they're pressed in opposite directions, we are going to place the pattern pieces on top of each other. You want to make sure that when you do this, the back side is with the back side and the front side is with the front side. Now again, these shoulder pieces are going to be facing in the opposite direction. That way when we sew it all together, there's not too much bulk. And we're going to pin this neckline area first. Now we're going to sew that neckline with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Again, you can use a zigzag stitch or a serger, and I'm going to be using a serger. That's what we're going to do for basically all of these seams except the hem. If you're using a serger and you've gotten all the way back to the beginning of your serged edge, I recommend cutting off the tail and then disengaging the knife so that you don't cut off the rest of your stitches. Okay, now that our neckline is sewn together, we are going to put elastic around the neckline. So we're going to sew right over the edge that we just sewed. The reason I like to do this in 2 separate steps is because it's very, very easy to mess up where this elastic is if you try to sew the elastic and the neckline together at the same time without doing it like where the neckline is sewn and then the elastic is sewn to that neckline. So this is why we're doing it this way. If you want, you can pin this all the way around and then sew it down. I actually prefer to just sew as I go. That way I can kind of manage the tension here. We don't want to pull on the elastic as we're going. We just want to let it fall naturally. The elastic is just there to hold the shape of that boat neckline around your neck and as it washes and wears over time. So we're going to sew this all the way around. This is 1/4 inch swimsuit elastic. You can also use normal elastic. This just happened to be what I had on hand. And you can also use a wider elastic if you have a hard time finding this 1/4 inch. I really prefer the 1/4 inch just because it can be basically fully enclosed inside of this serged seam or inside of your zigzag stitch, but some of my testers used a larger width of elastic and it worked just fine. So let's go ahead and sew these together. For those of you who are using a serger, you're going to want to disengage the knife each time you sew elastic to an edge that has already been sewn. That way you don't accidentally cut the elastic of the stitches from your previous seam. Now when you get back to the beginning of your elastic, you can cut off the excess tail on both ends, then continue sewing over those beginning stitches to finish your seam. Okay, that elastic is all in place. And now what we're going to do is we are going to flip the garment through this neckline so that the right sides are on the outside. So that's going to look like this. And then we're going to take this outer layer, pull it through the neckline again, like this. And then I'm just going to get it all nice and flat for us so that it's easy to see. Okay, now the right side of the garment is on the outside. We're going to sew these armhole pieces together using the burrito method. Hello, this is Editing Jessica popping in to tell you that this would have been the perfect time to distinguish the front and the back side, because once you do the burrito method, you're not going to be able to tell which side is which, and you need to know which side is the front specifically for the next step, because we're only going to stretch the elastic on the front armhole and not the back armhole. I'd recommend using some sort of fabric marker, like a piece of chalk or something, and mark the inside of the front of the garment. That way it's going to be on the interior of the garment. It doesn't matter if it washes away or not, and you'll be able to easily distinguish the front from the back side. Okay, back to the burrito method. If you've never done the burrito method before, don't worry, we're going to do it together and I believe in you. So we're going to start by rolling this side towards this side and we're going to roll it tightly. So you see how we're folding that burrito, just rolling it up. Okay, and now what we need to do is we need to fold this layer this way and this bottom layer towards the other side so that they meet. So we're first gonna take this layer and fold it like this. Same on this side. The top layer is gonna go this way. And then we're gonna take this back layer and it's gonna go underneath. So that will look like this. And now we're just going to pin all around this area, and this burrito that we made on the inside, it needs to stay on the inside. So I'm gonna start by pinning this section right at the shoulder seam. Then I'm gonna pin the bottom of the armhole here on both the left and the right side. And then we're just going to pin everything else in between, making sure to be mindful of not sewing down or catching that burrito on the inside. This might take a bit of maneuvering, it's totally okay. It's just important that we don't accidentally sew it down. You can also maneuver the interior as you sew. Just gonna push that out of the way, like this. Keep pushing that burrito out of the way. Now we're gonna do the exact same thing that we did with the neckline, where we sew this section together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then after we've sewn it together, we're going to take our elastic and we're going to sew the elastic down. The only difference is that when we sew the elastic down, we want the elastic to start about 1 centimeter from this edge here. That way, when we do a later step, it's not going to interfere with that step. But I will show you when we get there. Now, as you get to the most narrow part by the shoulder seam, you really want to be mindful not to catch the interior burrito in the seam. You can sew super slowly over this section and maneuver the burrito as you go. All right, that armhole is all sewn together, and now we're going to place this elastic and sew it down. The way that I like to do this is by having extra tail on this end and then sewing all the way around, having extra tail on this end and cutting it off here. But when we do this, we want to start our stitch about 1 centimeter in. We also want to end our stitch about 1 centimeter in. Then after we've sewn it down, we can cut off this excess piece. The excess basically just helps us get it under the machine and have something to hold on to as we start our stitches. All right, as we sew this seam, just a friendly reminder for those of you who are using a serger to disengage your knife so that you don't accidentally cut the stitches underneath. All right, now our elastic is sewn down, and you can see I have a tail on this side and I have a tail on this side, but the actual stitching didn't start at that very end. We started about 1 centimeter or so in. It's okay if it's a little bit more than 1 centimeter like mine is. And then we're just going to snip that off like this. And now you can see the elastic doesn't start at the very edge, it starts inward from the edge. We're gonna do the same thing here, like that. And now here is the fun part and the kind of like tricky, exciting part. We are going to unfold this burrito so that it's right sides out. And basically the way we're gonna do that is we're gonna take the burrito from the inside and we're going to start pulling it through itself. You want to do this really gently because you see how small of an area this is and how much fabric we're pulling through. We just want to be gentle with our seams. They should be pretty strong because we did double seams plus elastic, but it's worthwhile to just note that I would recommend going through this slowly. So we're gonna pull and pull, and I know it doesn't look like anything yet, but once we pull it out, it's going to be like magic. So we're gonna keep pulling, amazing. Get it all the way through there. Okay, and then once we open it up, beautiful. Okay, and now you can see that this edge is fully enclosed, this neckline is fully enclosed, and we just need to do the exact same thing for this side so that this edge is fully enclosed. So let's go through those steps again. We're going to start by burritoing this side down. Keep burritoing. We're gonna do this nice and tightly rolled all the way through. Okay. Now we're gonna take this top layer, and the top layer is gonna go over the burrito, like this, over the burrito. And then we're gonna take this bottom layer and it's gonna go underneath the burrito, just like this, okay? Then we're going to simply pin this area all together. So we'll do that outside edge and this outside edge. Then we'll do this piece in the middle here, being sure not to catch the burrito in the seam. And we're gonna keep going all the way around that armhole, just like before. Okay, now let's sew this together. I'm gonna do these next steps off camera because it's the exact same as the other side. And then once the elastic is in, we are going to unfold this burrito together. And just like magic, we are back with this armhole completely sewn together, and now it is time to unfold that burrito. This is the same as before. We're going to want to pull the burrito out nice and slowly and gently. I feel like I'm always making a squinting face as I'm doing this because I'm so nervous. But like I said, if you go gently, it'll be totally fine. Yay. Success. Now what we're going to do is iron down the armholes on both sides as well as the neckline, just so that it sits nice and flat and isn't bubbling apart from each other. And then we're going to close off these side seams together. Okay, so now that our neckline and our armholes are pressed, we're going to close these side seams. To do this, we're going to open up one layer and pull it over all the way down to the bottom. And we're gonna match up the side seams at this armhole area on both sides. So let's go ahead and do that first. And I'm gonna do this on the other side as well. Okay, and this back side needs to go all the way around, like this. And now we're going to pin here, and we're going to pin here. I know this might look a little bit funny right now, but if you just trust the process, it's going to be beautiful. Okay, so now we're gonna sew those side seams right here and right here, again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, both sides are sewn, and now we're just going to flip this portion down and pull out the inside, and just like magic, we have a shirt. Okay, the last step is just to hem the bottom piece. Since it's 2 layers, we want to hem them together. I'm just gonna flip mine up and I'm gonna sew it down with a cover stitch machine. You can also use a zigzag stitch, or you can use a twin needle. They will all do the exact same thing. Basically what we need is for the hem to have stretch so that you can stretch this garment over your body, which is why we're using a zigzag stitch or a serger stitch throughout the whole garment. If you wanna make this shirt completely reversible, you can do that by hemming this a little bit differently than I'm going to. You'll basically just take one raw edge and push it in, and then take the other raw edge and push it in, and then when you close them together like this, you will sew them as one piece. And so it looks beautiful from the outside and from the inside. That way, if you used a different color from the outside and the inside, you can have a fully reversible shirt and basically have 2 shirts in one, which we love. Since I used the same color for the inside and the outside, I am just going to do the method that I told you before. So I'm gonna start by pinning both of those side seams. So I'm just gonna pin both of these sides down, and then I'm gonna continue pinning all around the edge so that both layers are in unison. Now I'm going to take a seam gauge and I'm going to go up 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to use this to measure the hem upward. So I'm going to take this section and pull it up,
by the amount that we want, which again is 2 centimeters. And then I'm going to pin it in place. Do that again over here. And we can start taking these pins from here and using them like that. Now that the edge is clipped up by 2 centimeters all the way around, we can go ahead and top stitch it. Again, I will be using a cover stitch, but you can use a zigzag stitch or a twin needle. Okay, so if you use the reversible method for the hem, you're basically completely done. You might just want to do one last press throughout the rest of the garment. But if you use the same method as me for hemming, you might want to trim away some of this excess. It's not really necessary because it's not going to fray. I just like to clean it up because I think it looks nicer and more professional. I'm going to use these scissors that are called duckbill scissors, and this long edge is basically a guide that's going to help me not snip into the part of the fabric that I don't want to snip into. You still want to be careful and go slowly, but overall, I really love these scissors. All right, I'm just going to press this hem and then we are officially finished with our shirt. Congratulations, your everyday crop is officially finished. I hope that you are absolutely in love with it and that it gets tons and tons and tons of wear in your wardrobe. I called it the everyday crop because I want you to be able to wear it every day and feel super comfortable and confident in it. I have a ton of them and they are a workhorse in my wardrobe, so I hope that they become that exact same thing for you as well. And if this is your first time ever working with knits, I want you to give yourself a massive pat on the back. Huge congratulations, it is such an accomplishment. Knits can be especially tricky when you're just starting out, but I try to inject as much information into the pattern as possible so that you can be successful and have a beautiful fitting garment at the end. I also want to give a massive shout out to my over 45 testers for this pattern. They were amazing and they really helped the instructions be the best that they could possibly be. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you love your new top and I will see you in the next one.